I know that you can see it. Okay, so it's called the literature in the Middle Ages because it talks about all different forms of literature that were widespread. But the first it talks about is not really literature. It is drama. Drama means that it has to do with the theater. But you're going to see that at the beginning, when we talk about theater, we don't talk about theater in the modern terms. It starts with the so-called miracle and mystery plays. So what are miracle and mystery plays? Before talking about miracle and mystery plays, your book describes the beginning of the theater. And it says that at the beginning, religious festivals were opportunity for entertainment. What are religious festivals? Christmas, for example, is a religious festival. Easter is a religious festival, and so on. So there were opportunities for entertainment, which means that in the Middle Ages, religion and entertainment had to be connected because people didn't have many things to entertain themselves, to have a good time, to enjoy themselves. So you can call Christmas and Easter Christian festivals. So the word festival is correct when you talk about Christmas and Easter. What happened? They were represented in the form of dialogues sung between a priest and a choir. Pay attention to the pronunciation of choir. That is different from what you see spelled when you read it. So it means that during these religious festivals, in the churches, we are still inside the church, the events that happened at Christmas and Easter were represented like dialogues between the priest and a group of people that answered, and answering they became a kind of choir, okay? So there were stories also from the Bible that were represented, such as creation, Adam and Eve that were expelled from the Garden of Eden, Passion of Christ, the resurrection, or the last judgment. The problem is that at that time, all these events were told in Latin because Latin was the language spoken by the clergy, which also meant that the lower classes that took part in the religious events that went to the Mass couldn't really understand these things because they were in Latin. The fact that they were given dramatic form in the church was also done in order for these people to understand a bit better, even if the language they didn't master, they didn't know the language. Dramatic form in English doesn't mean a tragic form. Drama is the theater. Dramatic means that there isn't just one person talking about it, but there is a dialogue. There were more people that could talk about it in the form of characters, personages. Then, at first, so they were inside the church. Then these performances moved outside the church, in the churchyard. The churchyard is what lies outside the church. And then, little by little, also into other parts of the towns, such as squares, marketplaces, okay? So remember, at first the drama started inside the church, but in the form of a simple dialogue between priest and choir. Later it moved outside the church in the churchyard, and later on in the town, into other places of the town. What's the most important event is that little by little Latin was substituted by dialect, by the language spoken by the people. Your book calls it vernacular language, okay? As ordinary people, common people like peasants or people from the middle classes, took over, substituted the roles that were performed by the clergy. So if time passes, it isn't at the beginning. Little by little, there were a kind of performances that were made by ordinary people representing these events. I'm sorry. Especially, now we get to the 13th century, so towards the end of the Middle Ages. And it was the beginning of the cycles of miracle and mystery plays. What are cycles? Cycles means that there are a group of performances that are called miracles and a group of performances called mysteries. These continued to grow and they developed in the next 200 years. So it's a lot. It means that they were quite successful. The difference between mystery and miracle. Mystery plays performed the events that were told in the Bible, while miracle plays performed stories connected to the lives of the saints, and of course, especially the miracles that they performed.
Prof, teacher, but
yes.
What is, in this sense, the meaning of plays? The book.
Rappresentazioni,
Okay.
Cioè teatrali, not theater in the modern sense, ok? Quindi come diciamo...
Le opere teatrali.
Opera, sì.
Okay.
Then another important word is guilds, town guilds. Guilds can be translated with gilde, so I suppose you know what they are. Guilds are a group of people belonging basically to the same profession or art that gather together in order to defend their interests. But these guilds started to take charge of the performances. That is, they started to represent either miracle or mysteries. Of course, they created companies of craftsmen, artigiani, and artisans. They are similar, but with slight differences. They started to perform individual plays. Of course, there are 200 years in which they developed. And what happened? They became more and more sophisticated. Your book says elaborate. Why? Because the dialogue became richer and richer, but also the stage decor, that is the setting, and the use of props. In English, props is abbreviation of properties, and properties means all the objects that you use on stage when you are performing. What is extremely important is that now these plays where guilds took over were performed outdoors, so not inside places, on movable stages called pageants. So if I ask you what's a pageant is a movable stage. What is a movable stage? Okay, if you want to understand what it is, think of the carnival and carri allegorici. Okay, that's a pageant, movable stage. So a stage that moves and on which there are people performing something. Okay, is that clear? They were drawn by horses, so they moved because horses do them, and stopped at prearranged places in towns and very often in marketplaces. So sometimes they knew that they had to stop, for example, at a marketplace or let's say in a town square, and they started performing. Is that clear? What else we can say? Oh, they were considered a popular form of drama. Why popular? Because it's not for the upper classes. It's for everybody. Everybody can understand it. And because of this, little by little, elements of humor and parody were included. At the beginning, they were serious because they were performed inside the churches, because the priests were responsible for these representations. But when middle-class people or the guilds took over, of course, they wanted to be entertained. So even if they were religious in their themes, they started to be also funny because they were they were called interludes, elements of humor. Your book says that mystery plays are still produced today. So in some places, they are still produced. Then time passes. These miracle and mysteries will be substituted by a third form of drama that is called morality plays. It's a form of religious allegorical drama. Allegorical means symbolic. There aren't characters any longer. It's not the Virgin Mary or a saint or the angels, but types representing people, representing players, represent either a vice or a virtue or an abstract concept. Okay? So, your book says symbols of fixed values and ideas. Example, vices like greed, sloth, envy. You know the meaning of greed, sloth and envy? Avidità, sloth o anche la gola, sloth l'accidia, envy l'invidia. Or the virtues, patience, temperance, and so on. And so they talked about questions of morality. The most important one is called every man. And it's about a man that is going to die, and before dying he's afraid, he's a rich man, and he wants not to go alone. So he asks these symbols to come with him. For example, he asks his money, beauty, some of these, and he says no, because when you die, only good deeds will go with you, le buone azioni. All the rest is vain, vano. Okay? So, please, for the next time, that is tomorrow. Is it tomorrow?
Però domani dobbiamo fare grammatica.
Grammatica, venerdì. No, lunedì.
Yeah.
Lunedì.
Allora, it is for the Friday we don't meet. Also, this part, literary text, this PDF. Okay, because...
Ok, dobbiamo fare anche il PDF. Quindi.
Yeah, so the story of every man, but it's quite simple. If you want, if it is difficult for you to open it up, I'll give the link if you prefer. It's also on my site. Okay?
Okay. Bene.
We'll finish this. And you also do the first activity here. Can you see? The character of every man. It's about every man. You can do it after you read it.
Check it out, no? Check
it out. No. These are questions that I might ask you orally. So if you want to try to answer them orally, but not in a written form, do the activity of the first activity, and also be able to talk about it. Okay?
Okay.
Bye bye.
Arrivederci.
Bye.
Arrivederci. Arrivederci.
Arrivederci.
Arrivederci.